영어로 듣는 존 스타인벡의 분노의 포도, 서머리.
Hello everyone. Today, we confront one of the most powerful and heartbreaking sagas in American literature, John Steinbeck's 1939 masterpiece, The Grapes of Wrath. On this channel, we will summarize the novel's epic narrative, examine the life and philosophy of its author, John Steinbeck, and, most importantly, explore the devastating historical context of the American Great Depression and the plight of the migrant workers in the 1930s. Part 1. The Narrative of the Grapes of Wrath. The Grapes of Wrath is the story of the Joad family, poor tenant farmers from Oklahoma, who are forced off their land by dust storms and the mechanical might of bank-owned tractors. The novel chronicles their epic and tragic journey along Route 66 to California, the Promised Land, seeking work and a new beginning. The journey and the illusion. The departure, driven by desperation and the hope of plentiful work advertised in handbills. The Joads, a large, multi-generational family, pack their meager possessions onto a dilapidated truck. Their journey is fraught with hardship, mechanical breakdowns, death, the grandfather and grandmother die along the way, and the constant gnawing fear of starvation. The promise versus reality. California, the land of milk and honey, is a brutal disappointment. They find that the state is oversaturated with hundreds of thousands of other desperate migrants, contemptuously called Okies. Wages are pitifully low, controlled by wealthy landowners, and working conditions are inhumane. The core conflict. The Joads and other migrants are systematically exploited. They face hostile police, vigilante violence, and the contempt of established Californians. The novel brilliantly contrasts the vast abundance of California's fields with the desperate poverty of the people starving right next to them. Transformation and transcendence. The novel's spiritual heart is found in two characters. Ma Joad, the enduring matriarch who struggles relentlessly to keep the family unit whole. Her philosophy embodies the principle of solidarity. She realizes that the family's survival depends not just on blood ties, but on the survival of the collective, all the poor migrants together. Tom Joad, the protagonist recently paroled from prison, initially seeks only self-preservation. Witnessing the injustices, he undergoes a radical transformation. Inspired by the teachings of the former preacher Jim Casey, who becomes a labor organizer, Tom kills a deputy and goes into hiding, vowing to join the fight for social justice. His famous parting words express his transcendence. I'll be there. Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. The ending. The novel concludes with a scene of profound human dignity and shocking realism. After a massive flood destroys their temporary shelter, Rose of Sharon, Rosa Sharn, who has just given birth to a stillborn baby, breastfeeds a dying, elderly man in a final act of selfless human compassion. Part 2. The author, John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck, 1902 to 1968, was an author rooted in the very soil he wrote about. Deep roots in California. Salinas Valley. Steinbeck was born and raised in Salinas Valley, California, a region of immense agricultural wealth. He grew up witnessing the extreme disparities between the large landowners and the migrant laborers, often Mexican and Filipino workers, who passed through. Working among the poor. Unlike many intellectuals who wrote about poverty from afar, Steinbeck worked alongside migrants as a farmhand and laborer early in his life. This direct experience gave his writing an unparalleled authenticity and moral authority. Philosophy and the Grapes of Wrath. Inquiry and advocacy. Before writing The Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck spent months living with migrant families in camps, collecting data, observing their lives, and taking notes. His work was both investigative journalism and literature. Non-teleological thinking. Steinbeck believed in observing life as it is, without prejudice or assigning simple moral labels. This approach allowed him to paint the migrants not as pitiable victims, but as dignified, struggling human beings. The group man, the grapes philosophy. Steinbeck promoted the idea of the group man, or phalanx, the idea that individual humans are weak, but when they unite and find common cause, like the Joads and the other Okies, they become a powerful, enduring force. This philosophy is the central hopeful theme in the novel. The Grapes of Wrath was not just a literary success. It was a political event. It provoked immediate public outcry, leading to both bans and burning in certain regions, but ultimately driving crucial government reform regarding migrant camps and labor laws. Part 3. The Historical Context. The 1930s and the Great Depression. Steinbeck's novel is a historical document of the worst economic crisis in U.S. history and the subsequent migrant crisis. The Great Depression, 1929 onwards. Economic collapse. Following the 1929 stock market crash, the American economy collapsed. Banks failed, factories closed, and unemployment skyrocketed, eventually reaching nearly 25% nationwide. Agricultural crisis. Even before the crash, farmers suffered from overproduction and falling prices. The Depression intensified this crisis, leading to mass foreclosures as farmers couldn't pay their mortgages. The Dust Bowl and mass migration. The Dust Bowl. Beginning around 1930, prolonged severe drought and decades of poor farming practices turned the Great Plains, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, into a vast dust bowl. Massive dust storms. Black blizzards made farming impossible, suffocated livestock, and endangered human health. Technological displacement. Even without the dust, farmers were displaced by technology. Banks foreclosed on tenant farms and brought in powerful, impersonal tractors, rendering thousands of families obsolete overnight. Route 66 to California. Forced out by dust and debt, an estimated 300,000 to 400,000 people migrated to California between 1930 and 1940. This massive movement on Route 66 forms the central physical journey of the novel. The bitter reality in California. Supply versus demand. The influx of Okies created a catastrophic imbalance of labor supply and demand. Landowners found themselves with far too many desperate workers willing to accept starvation wages. Exploitation in the system. Landowners deliberately kept wages low and working conditions poor. They viewed the migrants as subhuman and easily replaceable. When the migrants attempted to organize or demand fair pay, they were immediately met with violence, arrests, and the destruction of their camps. Government camps. The hope. Steinbeck contrasted the privately run, corrupt, and brutal labor camps with the clean, organized, and democratic government camps, like the Weed Patch Camp in the novel, set up by the Farm Security Administration, FSA. These camps, though few in number, offered a glimpse of the dignity and self-governance that the migrants were being denied by the private system. Conclusion. The Grapes of Wrath is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of the ultimate economic and ecological disaster. It is a damning indictment of economic injustice, showing how greed and systemic failure turn the promise of the American dream into a nightmare. Steinbeck used the tragedy of the Jodes to force a nation to look at its own suffering and recognize the shared humanity of the dispossessed. The novel's enduring relevance lies in its call for empathy and solidarity, a reminder that when people come together, their collective spirit is, as Majode believed, unconquerable. The end. Thank you for joining us.